Well, hello. I'm Janet Morana, the Executive Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to Just Ask Janet. And of course, no, Janet's not confused. Normally, you see my program a little bit earlier in the day. However, because Father Pavone is still recuperating from open heart surgery, I've moved into his time slot in the evening. So I hope you're, tuning in and spreading the word that I'm going to have a lot of exciting guests these nights. So I hope you can join us for this programming. Well, today we're going to be really talking to a great friend of mine and Father Pavone's. His name is Dr. Michael New. He is a professor at the Catholic University of Catholic University in Washington, D.C. But Dr. New also really delves into statistics and studies on abortion. He follows the trends. He looks at the polls. He's able to analyze all the different things that are happening. And of course, a lot has been happening. So in this program tonight, we are going to touch on, for example, the FDA has now lifted under the Biden administration all the regulations on the chemical abortion pill, RU46. We're going to talk a little bit about that Mississippi case that the Supreme Court has agreed to hear. And we're going to talk about some of the general polling and opinion polls having to do with abortion. So, Dr. New, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Janet. It's a pleasure.
Well, let's just start with the first topic, which of course, I'm just going to remind everyone, RU486, that's the abortion pill. That's where the woman goes into the Planned Parenthood or the abortion clinic. She gets the first dose of that pill, takes it right then and there, which basically starves the baby. She goes home with a little paper bag with the second pill, and that one she takes about 48 hours later, which now will expel her dead baby. So now she has become the abortion doctor, and her home has become the abortion clinic, especially her bathroom, and she sees the remains of her unborn child. And I know for a fact that they're so traumatized by the testimonies we have of the women from Silent No More who have gone through this horrible chemical abortion. And you can go, brothers and sisters, to abortiontestimony.com and just read some of these stories. So now, up to this point, Dr. New, the FDA had certain regulations. When we say they've lifted all the regulations on RU486, what exactly have they lifted?
Sure. What they did is the Biden administration's FDA lifted some important regulations. And one regulation that we have in place is that chemical abortions have to be done after, or at least with in-person medical supervision. That means a woman who's obtaining a chemical abortion actually has to see a doctor, has to have an in-person medical examination before she takes the RU46 pill. What the Biden administration has done is they said for the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic, that regulation is no longer in effect. That means that women obtaining chemical abortions can go ahead, order the pills by mail, and obtain chemical abortions without an in-person medical exam. This is obviously going to have devastating health consequences. We know that chemical abortions are not safe. They're obviously fatal for the unborn child, but they pose serious health risks to women. The FDA legalized RU46 in around 2000. We know since then, according to the FDA, there have been 24 deaths as a result of the chemical abortion pill. There have been over 4,000 adverse events as a result of the chemical abortion pill. And that's just what we know of. Keep in mind, abortion reporting in this country, the regulations are very loose. So there's probably a good chance there's even more deaths, even more adverse events that we don't know about. And frankly, allowing women to go ahead and obtain these chemical abortions without an in-person medical exam is only going to increase these health risks. For instance, we know that if a woman has an ectopic pregnancy and she obtains a chemical abortion, that could be fatal. She could die. We also know there's a possibility a woman may misjudge the gestational age of her unborn child. And if that unborn child is older than she thinks and she takes the chemical abortion pill, that could pose some serious health risks. In fact, even the companies that sell these chemical abortion pills online acknowledge these health risks on their own website. So expanding chemical abortion is obviously going to be devastating for unborn children, but it's going to pose some serious health risks for women as well.
What can people do? Because people might right now, hear what you're saying about this and say, well, but what can we do now that they've lifted all these restrictions. And when you think about it, something as severe as a chemical abortion, that kind of a pill, with not having any, first of all, the abortion clinics already are horrific. They take no medical history, as you know, even whether it's a surgical abortion or a chemical abortion. And at least a doctor is prescribing the pill, but now you can get it over, practically, it's kind of like, I call it over the counter, mail in, not even and see, they're not even doing what's called the telemed abortion procedure, where they can, like, via Zoom, a telemed appointment. I mean, this is just actually zero medical intervention. You get this chemical pill, right, Dr. News? So what can the average person who's hearing this right now and is outraged by it, is there anything we can do?
I think it's gonna be tough. One thing we learn and we know, those of us who do pro-life work, is elections have consequences. The Trump administration fought to keep these regulations in place. In fact, the Trump administration went to court to make sure that women who obtain chemical abortions had to have an in-person medical examination. The Biden administration came into power. There's new people at the FDA, presumably, and they've undone these regulations. So, elections have consequences. There are things that could probably be done at the state level. There are some states that do make it a point to regulate chemical abortions and ensure that women who obtain them have to have in-person medical exams. So there is some hope at the state level. We can always educate our friends and our peers. I think that Live Action has done some, very good work trying to educate people on chemical abortions. A lot of, again, when the FDA approved RU486 back in 2000, it was an administrative decision. There were no hearings. There was no testimony. I think if they had to have hearings and testimony, and we could have heard from what happened in European countries and heard the testimony of women who had these chemical abortions and regretted it, I think things would have worked out a lot differently. So again, it's not going to be easy, but there are probably things we can do at the state level, and there's always things we can do as far as educating our friends and peers. And of course, we can always pray. Prayer is powerful, and I think we can always pray that women who face unintended pregnancies choose life.
Really good example of what can be done at the state level is Montana. You're familiar, right? That they just passed some great model legislation. I think that was drafted by Americans United for Life, addressing this whole chemical abortion and some other things, right? So there is hope, right, Dr. New, at the state level, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, states can regulate chemical abortions. Some states have sadly relaxed their laws and have allowed women to get them later in pregnancy, and we see chemical abortion numbers go up in those states. I mean, the law does have an impact, but on the good side, there are states like Montana that can put common sense regulations in place. So again, there is things that we can do at the state level.
Well, and of course, just recently we heard some more good news that the Supreme Court has granted certiorari, and certiorari means they've agreed to hear the case of the Mississippi law that's being challenged down in Mississippi. And this is really circling around viability. So what can you say, can you tell us pro-lifers about this whole idea? First of all, brothers and sisters, I want you to know, the case is not going to get heard before the Supreme Court goes out of session at the end of June. What this means is it'll be put on the docket probably in the fall. And from now till then, the lawyers on both sides are going to be preparing their arguments. And there'll be pro-life groups like Silent No More. We will provide amicus briefs for the arguments. But Dr. No, what do you have to say about this whole light now that we're going to see here in the Supreme Court?
Well, this is very exciting. Mississippi, the governor signed into law a 15-week abortion ban back in 2018. So unborn children after 15 weeks of gestation, would be protected in the state of Mississippi. Like a lot of pro-life laws, was challenged in court. And the Supreme Court agreed to take the case and decide on the constitutionality of this law. And the reason why this is very important and very exciting for pro-lifers is because this is the first time since the Roe v. Wade decision, the Supreme Court is hearing a case that deals with the constitutionality of an abortion limit or a gestational age limit. Supreme Court has ruled on tax-free funding of abortion. They've ruled on parental involvement. They've ruled on clinic regulations. They've ruled on the partial birth abortion ban, but they've never actually once since Roe v. Wade ruled on a gestational age limit. So obviously we have reasons for optimism. There are 6 judges on the Supreme Court who were appointed by Republican presidents. President Trump appointed 3 of these judges, Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch. Again, we can't say for certain, how the Supreme Court will rule. It is possible they may use this as an opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade. That would be wonderful. That means we could take action at the state level to really protect unborn children. It's also possible that they will just uphold this Mississippi law. That would be a good outcome as well. That would mean that other states could pass laws similar to Mississippi and protect unborn children after 15 weeks gestation. So again, there's a lot of reasons for optimism. Again, we're going to have to be patient. Oral arguments will not be till the fall, and we probably will not hear anything until June of 2022 about how the court rules. So we got to keep doing our pro-life work. We have to pray. But again, there's lots of reasons to be optimistic.
So everyone understands, okay, before Roe v. Wade, abortion was legal only in about 5 states here in the United States. And many of those states had limitations. So like, for example, New York, where I was from, up until recently, when they passed that expanded abortion law up till birth, it was only legal to get an abortion in New York State up till 24 weeks. And so when Roe v. Wade came about, it basically threw open the door, right, Dr. New, that every state now could have abortion on demand. And so this is very important because I do think maybe the court wouldn't want to just rule on abortion. But I think what's happening here is this is a good case because it's talking about the constitutionality of all this. And I think what a lot of these judges will say that, yeah, states' rights should be respected. The people of the will of that state, if they want to put certain limits based on viability of an abortion, they should be allowed to do so. And I think, Dr., when you say that this is why, first of all, the kind of education that pro-life groups can do now, because as you know, nothing did more to turn more hearts and minds away from abortion was during the whole partial birth abortion debate, as you know. That really helped sweep people with, people would say, well, now that's going too far. I'm not in favor of that. So I think with this viability rule and debate, that will get people to say, well, sure, if that baby is viable, then no, they shouldn't have to wait that long to have an abortion. They're going to do it. They got to do it early on or not at all. So I think we're going to be in for, wouldn't you say, a great period of education, right?
Yeah, I think that there are certainly educational benefits to the Supreme Court taking this case. You are correct about the whole debate over the partial birth abortion ban that started in the mid-1990s. And that couldn't be avoided. We actually had pictures of aborted babies on TV and in newspapers and in magazines. And you really saw public opinion change. I think as recently as like 1995, Gallup polls found that only 33% of people identified as pro-life. Now that number is typically in the mid to high 40s. In fact, sometimes we even break 50%. So certainly public opinion changed and changed very quickly once the partial birth abortion ban started to get attention. And I think something similar could happen here. I mean, most people don't think about abortion much day to day. Most people really don't know how permissive, how abortion policy really is in the United States. Late-term abortion bans tend to poll very well. Gallup has asked about bans or limits on second trimester abortions. I think they've asked this question about 6 times over the past 25 years or so. I think they found at least 65% of Americans think that abortion should really not be available after the second trimester. So again, late-term abortion bans always pull well. It puts pro-lifers on very favorable terrain politically. I think that, again, this is an excellent educational opportunity. I think, again, once people learn more about fetal development and just learn more about the brutality of these late-term abortions, I think that will persuade a lot of people to join the pro-life movement.
Dr. New, when we talk about overturning Roe, people would say, oh, does that get rid of abortion? And I always tell everybody, no, it doesn't get rid of abortion. What it does is it throws it back to the states, right? Which is what happened before Roe. It goes back to the states. And some states have really been very proactive. Like I know down in Louisiana, they have what's called a trigger law that when Roe v. Wade is overturned, abortion will become illegal in the state of Louisiana. And so I think that's why, wouldn't you agree, Dr. New, that all these laws that are happening in states to limit abortion is kind of getting ready for that day. And I think the pro-aborts on the other side see that. And that's why we see laws like happen in New York State, and I think now in Illinois, Vermont, where they've done these expanded abortion laws in their state that up till birth you can have an abortion. So isn't that really the whole battle right now? I think is going to eventually get back to the states when it comes to abortion, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If Roe is overturned, again, it would move the decisions back to the states, and state legislatures and governors would have to decide abortion policy for their respective states. And we certainly still have our work cut out for us. I mean, we can certainly count on a lot of states to do the right thing and protect unborn children in their states. So I think that there are several states, many states, would protect unborn children, but many states wouldn't. Obviously wouldn't expect California or New York or some of these other blue states to start protecting the preborn in their state, but it would start a national conversation. We could really start having discussions about protecting preborn children. That I think that it would shift public policy in a way that's helpful to the pro-life movement. It would save tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of lives every year, getting some of these more conservative states to protect the unborn children in their respective states. So again, our work isn't over. I remember there was something circulating on Twitter saying, "What would you do if Roe v. Wade was overturned?" And my response was, "Get a good night's sleep, because the next morning I'm going to wake up and get to work at the state level and try to convince states to protect preborn children in their states." So we certainly have our work cut out for us, but it would be a big policy victory for pro-lifers.
Dr. No, we know by the testimonies of the women from Silent No More, and people may not realize this, that legality gives permission. And so many of these women had said in their testimonies, well, if it wasn't legal, I probably wouldn't have thought about it. Well, if it wasn't legal, then probably a mother or father wouldn't have told their daughter to go get an abortion if it wasn't legal. If it wasn't legal, then a boyfriend wouldn't have said to his girlfriend, you better have an abortion. I don't want to be that. So this legality thing would also save lots of lives, because people, it's like, why do we have certain laws? Because it stops certain behaviors, right?
Right.
I mean, we don't just run into a Target and steal a TV, do we? Why? No. It's against the law. We get arrested. So legality does give permission. And I truly believe that in overturning Roe, that'll be like an aha moment, like, oh, you mean it's not legal anymore to get an abortion? So just that whole, what would you call it, like new policy would awaken to some people to say, maybe I shouldn't get an abortion because they just made it illegal, and maybe it's not good for me. So when you say that that whole legality thing will also save more lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if Roe's overturned, some states will make abortion illegal, and that will kind of delegitimize abortion. It'll stigmatize abortion. We know that law is a teacher, and we also know that when abortion is legal, abortion numbers go up. We have plenty of international data to back that up. Even here in the United States, between 1974, the first year where abortion was legal, and 1980, the U.S. abortion rate went up by 50%. People changed their behavior. More women with unplanned pregnancies obtained abortions. And the reverse would happen. I mean, if we put legal protections in place for the unborn, abortion numbers would go down. It would stigmatize abortion in some respects. It would delegitimize it in many respects. So again, it's not just, the weight of the law as such, but just the fact that abortion would become somewhat delegitimized and stigmatized if Roe v. Wade is overturned.
Now, you extensively follow all the different polls that are out there on the abortion issue, from the Gallup to Pew Research. Can you give us, in our remaining time here tonight, what would you say is the overarching, what are the trends in the polls, and what can you say about that?
Well, I would just, want viewers and listeners to realize that in the next year or so, we're going to hear about an onslaught of polls on Roe v. Wade. And a lot of these polls are going to be misleading. A lot of polls show that Roe v. Wade enjoys broad popular support. But these polls are misleading for two reasons. First off, most of these polls don't really explain what Roe v. Wade did. Roe v. Wade legalized abortion in all 50 states throughout all 9 months of pregnancy. That is a policy position that very few Americans share, frankly. But most polls don't explain that. The second thing these polls don't explain is what would happen if Roe was reversed. And again, if Roe's reversed, it doesn't ban abortion everywhere. It sends the issue back to the states. And state legislatures and governors have to make decisions about abortion policy in their state. So one thing just to keep in mind is that the incremental things that pro-lifers have been supporting, limits on taxpayer funding abortion, waiting periods, parental involvement laws, limits on third trimester abortions, limits on second trimester abortions, the sort of 15-week bans that Mississippi passed, the Supreme Court's going to be hearing about next fall or this coming fall. These things all enjoy broad popular support. So, the media is probably going to do their work to try to marginalize the pro-life position, but people shouldn't be discouraged. They shouldn't be fooled. A lot of these polls that claim that Roe v. Wade enjoys a lot of support are very, very misleading.
the pandemic and any of these polls that have happened, like Pew Research and things like that, showing the opinions of what would you say, church going Christians, has there been any movement of the needle about abortion in the way they look at it?
Oh, it's interesting. I mean, one of the best predictors of how somebody views abortion is how often they go to church. And even if it's a denomination that doesn't have strong teachings about abortion, consistent churchgoers are much more pro-life than infrequent churchgoers. So that is a very strong prediction. We haven't seen a lot of post-pandemic polling on abortion. The polls I've seen indicate the public attitudes on sanctity of life issues have remained relatively stable during the pandemic. So we have that. As far as kind of interesting trends go, we have seen some evidence that young adults are becoming more sympathetic to the pro-life position. The General Social Survey has been doing abortion polls since the early 70s, and they've been asking the same questions consistently for probably going on 50 years now. And they did find, starting around the year 2000, that the current generation of young adults seem to be a bit more open and a bit more sympathetic to the pro-life position than previous, generations of young adults. So I think that's a cause for hope. But mostly what we've seen lately is just stability. I don't see a lot of evidence that during the pandemic, abortion attitudes have changed all that much.
Well, and of course, I know you've done such great work, but you're there at a Catholic university in Washington, D.C. What can you say is the sentiment of, now these are Catholic students where their church teaching is teaching them abortion is wrong. It's against the church's teaching. But what would you say is the kind of, and I'm sure not every student that goes to Catholic university is, what would we say, a good practicing Catholic. But what would you say is the pro-life feel there on campus at Catholic U?
I would say Catholic University, I'd say roughly over 80% of our students are Catholic. It's a school with very solid, strong pro-life sentiment. The Cardinals for Life group, which is our pro-life group, is a large group. They come and pray in front of the DC Planned Parenthood on Saturdays, and I sidewalk counsel there, and I appreciate their support. So it's a school which has a very strong pro-life orientation. That in recent years they've actually canceled classes for part of the day of the March for Life, so people could attend. It used to be an excused absence, but President Garvey has made it at least partly an off day, that morning and early afternoon classes are canceled so that faculty, students, and staff wish to go to the march can go ahead and do so. And just one thing I've noticed, I've been on college campuses consistently since 1993 as an undergrad, a grad student, a researcher, and a college professor. And I've just seen, a lot more sympathy for the pro-life position among college students as I get older. When I was an undergrad at Dartmouth in the mid-1990s, it was very odd to find somebody who was pro-life, even in conservative political circles. You had a lot of people who were pro-choice or who were pro-life, but just didn't think it was that important. Nowadays, when I meet with students, especially conservative college students, almost all of them are pro-life. So I really see that, people tend to, if they're not always sympathetic to the pro-life position, they understand it. They realize we have good arguments. They realize we're people of goodwill. So I think it's exciting, being on college campuses. I really do see the progress that we are making. Students for Life has done a great job giving resources to pro-life college students around the country. They do a great conference after the March for Life every year. I think the youth outreach you're doing is very exciting. So again, I think young people give me a lot of optimism for the future.
A lot of parents now have their high school seniors have graduating this month and looking forward to going off to college, some as early as August. And as a professor at a university, what advice can you give to parents who are now like, oh my gosh, is my kid going to lose their faith? Is my practicing Catholic kid going to stop going to church? What advice, because I know how nervous parents get about that kid like leaving the nest. What advice would you give to parents that are going to be sending their kids later on in the summer off to college for the first time?
Well, obviously, every child is different. If you can send your child to a school with a very good, solid Catholic orientation, that's certainly a good thing to do. Even if that's not the case for an individual child, finding a school with a very good, solid Catholic ministry, where there are priests who really invest in students, that do a lot of events, where there is kind of a strong kind of social network of Catholics, that can mean a lot, that a lot of times what influences behavior for college students is their peers. And if they can find a lot of people who, are practicing Catholics and are invested in the Catholic faith, that helps them as well. It's, I think, easier to lose your faith if nobody around you is Catholic. But if you're in a small community, even if it's, of other Catholics, that can really help people with their own faith journey. So I would tell parents, send your child to a school with a strong Catholic orientation, and if that's not possible, or if that just doesn't work for your child, at least try to find a school which does have a very strong Catholic ministry, and encourage them to get involved. At least show up at mass, do an activity or a ministry with the other students, try to make other Catholic friends. That can really help people a lot along in their faith journey.
Of course, I'm very good friends with Mary Kaminsky, who works in the campus ministry office at Montclair State University in New Jersey. So you can imagine the state university in New Jersey, a blue state, how there's a real pro-abortion, there among the faculty and students at large, and yet their campus ministry of the Catholics coming is just blossoming. Father Jim Churn there, I mean, and my friend Mary, they do an awesome job with activities throughout the year. They even had, Dr. New, focused missionaries there assisting their campus ministry program. So I guess the best advice for parents too would be, make sure you do know what is in place at the university your child is going to. And if you don't know, we'll make those phone calls and find out. And it's almost like give them a cheat sheet going off to school. I would say, here's what's available in your campus before you get there, so that they'll kind of hook up and connect with the right resources. And of course, Catholic U there in DC, we know Ave Maria School in Florida, which I know you taught at for a while. We have Steubenville in Ohio. We have let's see, I think it's St. Thomas out in California. There are, I would say, about a half a dozen what I would call A-list Catholic universities, right, Dr. New, that are just amazing in the pro-life spirit on those campuses. Actually, in Steubenville, I know they have pro-life as a minor. That students can do a pro-life minor even in Steubenville University. So there's a lot of hope, I think, out there. And like you're saying, in this young generation, that they are pro-life. They see that, why are we killing babies? I always say the younger the kid, the quicker they get it. Even when you have too, out in front of abortion mills trying to counsel women, the young kids that are out there, they get it. Live baby good, dead baby bad, right? So even the youngest children can kind of get a pro-life position, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. The other piece of advice I'd give parents is do a little bit of research on the faculty. Most strong Catholic schools like Ave Maria, most of the faculty are believing Catholics. But if your son or daughter is not going to a school with a strong Catholic orientation, identify some Catholic faculty and encourage your son or daughter to take classes with that professor. That there are faculty who love the Catholic faith, who are invested in the Catholic faith, who will provide good instruction and provide good resources and mentorship to your son or daughter. So again, it's important to know who your son or daughter, not only who they hang out with, but what professors are taking. And again, it's important to identify good Catholic faculty for them to take some classes with.
As always, you always give us a wealth of information, and I hope our audience tonight feels inspired. Remind you can go to our website, priestforlife.org, where we have a lot of information. We always put up action alerts of things that are happening in the movement that you can get involved on a daily basis. There was always action we could be taking. And brothers and sisters, also go to our online store at prolifeproducts.org. We have some great products up there, again, that you can help spread the word. We're getting into these summer months is like, I can just feel it barking at our heels. People tend to take a relaxed mode, but not in the pro-life movement. We've got to educate. And remember, brothers and sisters, there are some abortions only you can stop, and some lives only you can save. Join us again next time on Just Ask Janet. God bless.